From Silence to Recognition is made possible by funding from Emory University.
I suppose that I always knew my story wasn't the only one, but I had no idea of the scope involved. At the exhibit that Dr. Eric Goldstein had curated, all of a sudden we come to 3 panels that were part of the exhibit. I just stood gazing at that first panel, because that first panel showed graphically 65% of the Jewish students at Emory Dental School during the period 1948 to 1961, which was the tenure of the dean, Dr. John Buehler. 65% of the Jewish boys were either flunked out completely or had to repeat 1 or more years. All that did was show numbers. Nobody had ever really thought about the bodies, the people that were represented by those bar graphs. It was at that moment that I decided to consider taking up the challenge.
I have spent virtually my entire academic career studying anti-Semitism, studying prejudice. Too rarely do I get to see its impact up close and personal, and that was the case here.
I applied to Emory, went to Emory enthusiastically, met a lot of great fellow students. The ambience of dental school was totally different. The pressure, so to speak, was there. There was a growing uneasiness. I did not know that I was dismissed from the school until I received the letter from Dr. Buehler, from the dean. That was a letter which one opened and read, the dreaded letter. I had to go to my parents and say, hey, guess what I just got in the mail? And I will tell you that taking the letter up to my mother in particular, who another certified obsessive, who I characterize as if I came home in my earlier days of schooling and told her I made 100 on a test, she would say, why didn't you make 103? That was an extremely difficult time because you have nothing to back you up. You have absolutely nothing but a letter.
The better part of 20th century American history is laced with tales of inclusion and exclusion. And so if you look at opportunities for admissions to the most selective colleges and universities in the United States, you realize that that story parallels our own struggles with what it meant to be a not only participatory democracy, but an inclusive democracy. Universities found themselves then right at the vortex of these two competing impulses in American life. It really fell hard on those children of Jewish immigrants who came to the United States in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. It's not only admissions to Harvard College and to Columbia, but to medical schools and other kinds of professional schools.
The fact of the matter is, the finest American universities had a long record of institutionalized anti-Semitism. It was embedded in the culture of this country. We forget that because there's been such a dramatic change in the United States. But it was very much present.
Emory is a university that underwent tremendous change in a very short time. It started in 1836 as a small Methodist college that was tucked away in the woods of central Georgia. And within a rather short time in the history of institution, it became a large urban university located in Atlanta in 1919, and then grew into a university of international renown, which brought into its fold people from all different backgrounds and faiths, and really changed the nature of the university from what it had been as a small Southern Christian college.
We were seated alphabetically. So the fellow next to me, my name's Paulin, his was Patterson. But George Patterson and I became very good friends. And there was just so much volume to learn that George and I decided to study together. And a lot of times he would study one part and I study another, and we teach each other. So as it turned out, if we take a test, if I missed 3 questions, he missed the same 3 questions. And this happened over and over again. He was never called in, but I was called in and accused of cheating. And they asked me what I could say for myself. I said, well, why don't you make a test up and give it to George and I, put us in different rooms and see. And Bueller did that. And we both missed the same questions. In different classes, George would make an A, I'd make a B. I was always downgraded.
It's hard to pinpoint exactly what Bueller's motivations were in discriminating against Jews. You can see in his correspondence with officials that he aligned himself with those who were more anxious, more fearful of the way in which the changing and the expansion of the university would impact the university's identity, and particularly the religious identity.
Bueller, when he came down here, and to this day I don't know why they hired him, he had a year and a half of college. He had a dental school degree. If they had looked carefully at his resume, they would have seen that he was teaching at the University of Indiana, and they kicked him out of there. His former mentor, Dr. Timmons, rescued him, and he brought him to Temple, and he had him as his half-time person, just doing his scut work and half-time in the clinic. What happened was he'd been there 6 or 7 years, and his loud mouth was known all around the school. And one day the head of the oral surgery department, who was an extremely well-known person, came in to Dr. Timmons and said, "It's him or me." This was in 47. And he said, "What do you mean?" He says, "If you don't fire that guy, I'm leaving." And he couldn't allow him to leave. So he shopped around and he found, guess what? There's a deanship down here at Emory that's open. So he pawned him off, And Emory, why did they take him? The guy had a year and a half of college. He'd gotten kicked out of Indiana. He'd gotten kicked out of Temple, basically, and they hired this guy.
The dental school was far beyond anything that I'd ever conceived occurring at Emory, because to get into a school and then have somebody deliberately making your life a living hell, which is what it had to be. Can you imagine trying to study knowing that whatever you did was not going to be acceptable to a dean who was dedicated to flunking you out, and sometimes not even finding that out till after you were getting perfectly acceptable or high grades in courses?
He was a bully, and bullies rule by intimidation. Dean had called me in. I sat down. He said, "Ronald," he says, "I flunked 19 from your class." He says, you're the 20th. And he says, "I can even flunk you or pass you." He says, "But why? Why do you Jews want to go in dentistry? You don't have it in the hands." And he repeated himself. He says, "You need to go into other professions. You don't have it in your hands." I did well in school. In fact, I'd finished my senior requirements when I was a junior. And I spent much of my senior year treating some of the faculty. They must have thought my hands were good enough for them.
You often have cases where there's a leading figure who seems to be the one propelling the anti-Semitism. It's important to understand the larger institutional context and the social setting of Emory and Atlanta in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, because without that, this individual's actions wouldn't have been possible.
We were all updated on who to watch out for and who to avoid, never talk back, and if they trashed your work, just accept it and redo it. Dr. Bartholomew, the head of the operative dentistry and the overseer of the lab, I tried to stay out of his way. One day Bartholomew Dr. Bartholomew came through the door cursing me, called me a damn Jew, and got up and I was going after him. And three of my friends tackled me and laid on me, and Bartholomew turned around and left. I never disrespected him, and the funny thing was, he always gave me good grades because my work was good.
About a month before graduation, with no advanced knowledge or anything, someone told me that I was wanted in the dean's office. So I went up, knocked on the door, walked in, the dean was behind his desk, and I look around, and the Supreme Court's there, the head of every department of the school. And I was on my feet for about a little over an hour. And they went one by one, operatives to prosthetics, oral surgery, everyone, telling me what a lousy student I was. I should have never gotten out of the first year, that there's no way I'm going to graduate. This went on all around the room. And when that was over, I was ready to faint. I walked out, and the head of operative, Bartholomew, known as Black Bart, was out about 2 minutes later. And I'll never forget this. I was ready to cry. In fact, my eyes are tearing now. He put his arm on my shoulders. He said, "Jay, you know you're one of my best students, but I have a wife and 2 kids, and I have to play on this team."
I graduated from high school in 1949. I entered Emory University undergraduate school, and it was great. We were totally unaware of anything that was happening down on Forest and Cortlandt Avenue downtown in Atlanta, where the dental school was. I did apply there because I'd gone to Emory undergraduate school and liked it and had friends. So when I was accepted, I went to Emory. There were 4 of us guys, Jewish boys, who got accepted in 1951 after Emory undergraduate. 2 years later, all 4 of us would be gone. Kicked out of school, all 4 of us. At the end of the year, you go home, and all 4 of us were told that we were not going to be permitted to come back. And that's how we found out. We got that dreaded letter. And more likely than not, our parents would say, "What have you done to me?" When you began to try to explain what happened, nobody believed you. They just didn't believe. "Oh, that's impossible." Emory? You know what we did? We just shut up. It was a fraternity of silence.
So it became this incredible pattern. When they looked previous to 1948, there was no such pattern. About 13% of Jews were failing, as opposed to what became seen as 65% were not graduating. That was an extraordinary number. That's what Art Levin at the ADL was able to show in charting the prejudice. With cooperation from some of the dental students, he got a hold of graduation programs for a 10-year period and took out sort of the Jewish surnames so they could see how many Jewish students were enrolled in each class.
This is 50 years ago. A young man came to me and said he had been flunked out of Emory Dental School. He had been before me to the Jewish Community Council of Atlanta, and none of them believed him. They said, you're just making up an excuse for your inability. I, however, did believe him. I was able to show that 65% of the Jewish students were flunked out, and I said I was going to go use this material and go up and see the president. The Jewish Community Council said, "Look, let us do this. We're more influential than you, one person." I had a discussion with the president and the dean. The dean denied any anti-Semitism and said, but I won't do it anymore. He denied any anti-Semitism, but he wouldn't do it anymore. So the Jewish Community Council came back, delegation triumphant. And I said, screw that. This guy has been torturing Jewish students for 10 years, and you're going to take that as an excuse? And I said, I am going up to see the president of Emory University. And I went up with a very good friend of mine, Morris Abram. He was president of Brandeis University for a while. He was a young lawyer at the time.
It was very standard at that time, I guess in many schools, to ask a student what his religion was. Dr. Buehler went much further. He added a category, race. And he gave you 3 choices there: Caucasian, Jew, or other. The boys got one of those to the Anti-Defamation League, and they took it to Dr. Martin. Dr. Martin was out of town. His assistant was over there, but they didn't feel like they wanted to leave it with an assistant. They weren't really happy or too optimistic about taking it to Dr. Martin, but they certainly weren't going to leave it with an assistant. So it occurred to them to take it over to Dr. Ward, because most of the people really trusted Dr. Ward. Dr. Ward was really upset, and he marched over to Dr. Buehler's house. And we don't know exactly what he said to Dr. Buehler, but it wasn't long after that Dr. Buehler resigned. There were letters to the editor saying, why didn't the Jewish boys work as hard as the non-Jewish boys, instead of just whining and complaining about discrimination? When they went to Dr. Martin, who was president of the university, they asked the question, the reporters asked the question, is there anything at all, is there any relationship between these rumors we hear about charges of anti-Semitism and discrimination in the Emory Dental School? Is there any relationship between those charges and Dr. Buehler's resignation? And Dr. Martin said, no uncertain terms, he replied, absolutely not. There is no substantiation to those charges. They were without any basis. Dr. Buehler could have remained as dean if he had wished to.
They gave me the opportunity to resign, stating that it would not be on my record that I flunked out, and it would give me the opportunity to do other things in my life, but apparently dentistry was not going to be a profession for me. So I wrote him a letter of resignation, obviously, and then sat around on my couch for about a week deciding I better do something with my life. And then I decided, you made A's and B's in all of your basic sciences in the med school. You loved that. Why don't you become a physician? Go to medical school. It was a totally different experience. It was a lot of hard work, but it was a lot of fun. I would venture that 90 to 95% of my friends have no idea of what my history is. Absolutely none whatsoever.
At the beginning of the junior year, you have to get requirements. I was in Clinic 2. I mean, it's disgusting that a university, even in those days, black people were treated in Clinic 2, which was downstairs in the basement. And you had to get some requirements, so you signed up for whatever it was that you were going to do, and so I did some work in Clinic 2. And right at the beginning, I had to get some material. And in order to get material, even if you were in Clinic 2, you had to go up to the main clinic floor. Maybe it was the 3rd floor. So you had to run up. You could take the elevator. It was quicker to run up and down the stairs. So the first time I went up the stairs, and I went to check out some things, and this woman is standing behind the counter, and she looks at me and she says, "Arnold, "What are you doing in Clinic 2? She says, "That's for the Jewish boys." I said, "I'm one of the Jewish boys."
There are wounds that have been carried by the people who suffered this discrimination because of the fact that it was never openly acknowledged by the university. No one has ever delved into the personal stories of how this affected the lives of individuals. And what Perry Brickman has found in talking to many of these men is that some of them never told their own wives and children that this had happened to them. The fact that this event is occurring has provided a chance for this to be aired for the first time, for these individuals to tell their story, for them to feel that their pain and that the discrimination that they faced is being acknowledged, in the sense that the silence is being lifted, so they can talk about it for the first time.
There are some whose wives and parents never believed that they fulfilled what their parents had sacrificed for, or what their spouse had sacrificed for, to help get them into dental school or through dental school or finance their education. It's like a drop of blood in a glass of milk. If you taint somebody, no matter how much milk you pour in it, it's still pink. Life could have been so different if they'd been treated fairly.
You were being abused. I thought, well, that's related to the German philosophy that Jews were inferior. There were some faculty members that were understanding, very nice, and I think knew what was going on. One in particular would tell me that he didn't think it was fair what was happening, but he wasn't in a position to do anything about it.
Did they try to do something and were powerless? Were they just too scared to do anything? Were they apathetic and didn't really care what was happening behind the scenes? Art Levin, who today we uphold as a hero for exposing this, at the time was vilified. He really experienced a lot of discrimination of his own from within the community, saying that how dare you make this public and embarrass a university that has been good to our community.
Jews in the South were very, very hesitant and very, very reticent about going public with anti-Semitism that they encountered in their lives. And these men in the dental school did not do that. One of them, as you probably know, never told his mother. One of them still hasn't told his wife what happened to him.
Minority communities in America run a very interesting line because you're proud to be an American. You don't want to just be tolerated. You want to be treated as equals. And yet your strategies for becoming part of mainstream America may differ. You know, you have to take things and judge timing. When do you want to be aggressive? When do you need to work behind the scenes? And we don't all agree.
When that sort of discriminatory practice takes place, everyone is wounded. Those who are the objects, the victims of that sort of activity, and the institution itself, which is acting in this case outside of the very character that it espouses to be, the enlightened sort of place that universities are supposed to be, the open sort of place that universities are supposed to be, that invite conversation, that invite people from different perspectives, that imagine human potential can be developed for everyone. To act this way is to act in denial of those fundamental principles of the role of education. So I think it's important, acting in my capacity as president of Emory University on behalf of all of Emory, as well as myself, to state strongly our regret for this anti-Semitic practice during that period, and regret also for the long period that it has taken for us to acknowledge that it even existed. Happily, Emory has come quite a ways since that time. To come on campus now is to encounter people from a broad range of religious and ethnic and national backgrounds, different races, sexual orientations, and gender identities. Thanks to Dr. Brickman's work, we can and will be more vigilant in the future to ensure that Emory can be the sort of Emory that it claims to be, and to guard against such episodes. These really are genuine regrets. They hurt deeply. I realize that as an individual, I don't have personal involvement, but as an individual who is part of a community, I hurt for our community. And our community is 175 years old. And thanks to Dr. Brickman, we have an opportunity to be a better community because we are no longer blind to or failing to acknowledge this particular moment in our history.
Today we sort of take for granted we have laws that forbid discrimination in the workplace, in education, in housing. That wasn't always the case. I was very pleased to hear that the university not only was interested in the case, but was interested in bringing to light what had happened and to make an apology, a formal apology to those who suffered under the dean's reign. For an institution to make acknowledgement of wrongdoing and to issue an apology speaks volumes about the values of that institution.
President Wagner often talks about honest inquiry, and I think this is the height of honest inquiry. The university has said this is a mark on our history, and the only way of addressing it is by turning around and shining a light on it.
I think acknowledging this chapter in Emory's history is important because of what our vision statement says. Not to acknowledge a shameful chapter in the university's history would be essentially to live a lie, to live as an institution that has not fully recognized its past.
If we are going to be the best Emory that we can be going forward, we need to benefit from the lessons of all of our history. Not just those parts of history that we'd like to remember, but those that we deeply regret.
At the very least, we can learn from their tenacity, their resilience, and really their many accomplishments. Having said that, however, if one reads the transcripts of the oral interviews and sees the video clips, one will understand that most of them still bear scars and many unpleasant memories. It's not Emory, but it was Emory.